little bit of tech news for you today. The iPod Touch has been discontinued, which totally brings an end to the iPod line after 20 years.
Man, that's really sad. I feel like that also makes me feel incredibly old. I very distinctly remember the first time I saw an iPad or an iPod, I should say. My friend Chris had one and he showed it to me. And I thought, this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. I need to have one of these immediately.
It's funny because I really think they could bring back like the click wheel iPod, like the touchscreen. I should clarify, like the only iPod I've ever had was an iPod Touch. And then I moved to an iPhone, which had Apple Music and Spotify. But I really feel like Apple could bring back the click wheel iPod and people would buy that up.
100%. There is totally nostalgia for the click wheel. I have no doubt. That was the first one that I ever saw was the click wheel one. And I fully believe that people would buy that. I had one of those little iPod Nanos. Do you remember those? The really tiny little square
Yeah,
one?
I think my mom had one of those. She goes running a lot, so she would clip it on and run. But
Yeah, it had a little clip. It was very clever.
oh man, yeah. But I like the iPod I had was an iPod Touch in high school specifically, and at that point it was basically just an iPhone. And I think that's where we ended up was, everyone has iPhones and streaming music. There's no need for that actual device. But I know one of my friends in college, he used to tell us that his dad had the old classic and I think it had a spinning hard drive in it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they would be,
I think you're right.
yeah. And they would be driving, they'd hit a pothole and like the iPod would like kind of like skip like a CD would.
I God, this is going to make me sound like such a nerd, but I'll just share this anyway. This is, obviously it's just you and me talking, right? So I had an iPod and I ran out of space on it. And I found out that you could actually buy larger hard drives and open up the iPod and put a larger hard drive in your like existing case. And so I did that. The problem was that the physical hardware of the larger hard drive was like kind of bigger than the actual iPod case. So it never really closed again after I did that. So I kind of ruined my iPod, but I did get some additional storage and it sort of worked for a while.
It's really funny you bring this up. One of my old friends back home, he has an iPod and he found, I don't know the technical details, but it's basically like an SD slot. And you pull out the old hard drive, you put this new one in, and you can put SD cards in. So now you've got a solid state iPod. And obviously, an SD card is a fraction of the size. So he's got one of those now, and it's pretty fancy.
So fancy. I remember at one point I had, again, totally dating myself. I had one of those little like Palm Pilot-y things and it had an SD card in it or an SD slot. So you could put an SD card on it. And I had a little one that had maybe like 11 songs on it. And then I would listen to music on that. This was before the iPod was an actual thing.
I don't know what a Palm Pilot is, to be honest. And I'm totally going to throw another friend under the bus. And if she's listening to this, she's going to know who I'm talking about. But until like last year, she didn't use like Spotify or Apple Music. She'd buy individual songs. And I was like, you're spending $1.29 on a song. And, Apple Music for students and whatnot is $5, $9 a month, I think, without. I was like, that's like, an album you could buy, just have any song you wanted. But, like I said, we went from the iPod to streaming media now, which, ultimately killed the iPod. But it kind of reminds me of that switch from the iPod, or I guess I had an iPod. I don't know what it was called, to be honest. Mini, I think it was. It was like a green color one with the click wheel. But I remember the transition from that to an iPod Touch because suddenly I had like, apps and Safari. I could browse websites and everything. And it was totally, a cool device. And now looking back, I'm like, man, that thing's old, but kind of brings me.
It had a good run though.
It had a good run. Yeah. But it brings me to something I want to talk about today, Gabe, is really websites and what people do on the web. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you what is your favorite website, and I'll tell you mine, but I can't give you any secrets to mine.
So I was thinking about this. I think my favorite website is a website that I look at pretty much every day when I'm eating my breakfast. I have my iPad out, and I bring this website up, and it is a website called theringer.com. And it's mostly about sports and some pop culture stuff. But I just like to stay what's going on with like the NBA. I'm a big NBA guy. I love the Warriors, and I like to keep up to date on what's going on around the NBA. So that's like keeps me up to date. And it's like nice little digestible articles that I can read in, the 5 minutes or 10 minutes that I'm eating my breakfast. And I think that's my fave, man.
No, okay. I was really scared there for a minute. We were going to say the same website, but we did not. Mine is 100%, and this is probably the one I use the most, is Reddit. Have you ever used Reddit at all? And
yeah, no.
The thing with Reddit, so it's basically a collection of communities. And I know we want to talk a lot about communities next week. We'll have a special guest on too. But with Reddit, everyone gets on and makes these communities. So there's one for, technology. You can go on and people discuss technology. If you want to follow, NBA, you can go to the NBA subreddit and everyone's talking about, the NBA. But it's different communities. And I think it's just fun to go on and browse. And there's really a community for just about anything you could think of. It's kind of wild.
It is wild. I'm definitely aware of Reddit. And I would say I have ended up on Reddit threads, because sometimes when you'll Google stuff, it will just, you search for things and it will actually drive you back to some random Reddit thread. And then you end up in this, weird world of Reddit. But I don't know. I haven't ever, I don't think I've ever gone there specifically to go look for something.
Oh man, I 100% do. Like if I have a tech support problem, maybe my computer's giving me problems, or maybe it's a product comparison too. I'll type in MacBook M1 Pro Reddit, and I can see what actually people are talking about. What issues is someone else having. But that's 100% how I use it. It reminds me back in my day, I used to use YouTube for the same thing. If I had a problem, I'd go to YouTube. I'd be like, how to file taxes, YouTube, and see what everyone else is doing. But now it's the same thing with Reddit, just in a different format.
All right. Well, you maybe have converted me. I might have to give it a shot the next time I have some random.
Check it out, Gabe. And last week we talked a lot about those DTC companies and what makes their websites effective and everything. And I really want to talk a bit more today on websites. I know you and I both have some web experience. Most recently, I've led a website redesign project, but I want to begin by talking about one of my favorite website examples. And honestly, a feature that I think they should implement. And the website is Zillow. And design aside, I'm not going to praise the design, say it's the best designed website, but I think it's just a fantastic website to begin with. If you're looking for a home, an apartment, whatever that may be, you can go on, you can browse the map, you can browse Zillow, see some details about that home, and really spend some time looking around. And on the homepage of Zillow, I just pulled it up and it says, find it, tour it, own it. So, Zillow's, they know why people are coming to their website. They know what they're trying to do. So that tagline is just fantastic. And then you can dive right in, search for a house. It's super easy to use. There's not anyone I know that doesn't know how to use Zillow or doesn't know about Zillow. But it also kind of reminds me of why do people use Zillow? Because, I'm sure people do use it for looking to buy a house. But when I think of my use case, last night, I was looking for a house in San Jose, and then I was on a beach in Hawaii looking for a house. And I think Zillow is one of those fun websites where it has kind of two use cases. One is hey, I'm actually looking for a house. And two is, oh, I could go live in this, $15 million house.
I feel like the podcast is going to have to get a lot more popular if we're going to be able to afford a $15 million house. But
it's a goal.
I understand what you mean. I mean, I've certainly done that too, where, you're the house 2 doors down from you sells and you're like, well, they were asking this. I wonder what they actually got. Zillow's a great place to go to, be weird and creepy and, look into all of that information as well. Also, I feel like one of the most brilliant things that they did was the Zestimate. So, as a homeowner, I'm very curious about the Zestimate of my home. Not that I have any intent of selling my home, but it's just always nice information to know. And I feel like it totally.
I feel like I'd be one of those guys.
Voyeur part of it.
I'd be one of those guys that gets on and sees the Zestimate, and I'd just be like, "Well, that's not right," Which is tough to do in this economy. But the other thing with Zillow,
or it went down $3,000 from yesterday, and you're like, oh man, I can't believe I lost $3,000.
They drove by and saw the neon sign in my window or something. But I
Yeah,
it,
something like
and
that.
I think Zillow's fun. It's a fun website for me to use. Obviously, I'm not out there like looking to buy a house, but I think it just goes back to show like, oh, companies like Zillow are bringing traffic to their website, and I'd be genuinely interested to see how many people are like, taking my approach and just browsing, looking to see what's out there. But one thing I think Zillow really needs to implement, and I think this would like just totally change the game for Zillow, but I think they need a comment section on the listing, because could you imagine like your neighbor's house goes on the market and like you can just get on a comment and be like, oh, look, this piece of trash, down the street, or like, who painted those walls? I feel like adding a social network component to Zillow would just be a game changer. And if anyone from Zillow is listening
Oh
to
my
this
gosh.
podcast, send me a message. Let's talk.
That would be bonkers. People would talk so much trash on there. It would be insane. It would be next door, I feel like, times 100, because you'd just be on there talking crap about your neighbor, about like your crazy neighbor who's selling their house or something like that.
Oh
That would be
man,
just completely nuts. I
absolutely. And
kind of
like
want it
the
just for the.
design, I think of like the design choices people make too, because like I've seen some houses on Zillow and I'm like, what are they thinking? But I think this the whole Zillow web experience is just fantastic. They know what they're doing. They have an easy to navigate website. I'm guessing half the people listening to this podcast are going to be on Zillow tonight, looking at a house they're not interested in buying.
It is weird how you want to do that, but I'm with you though. I've totally done the same thing, and I don't know what it is, but I think it's just the ease of use of going on there, and you know, as you said, the well designed website, being able to quickly get to what you want to check out. It is a very well designed site. I'll give you that.
So, that's enough fun of talking about like good websites. I want to talk about a
Oh
bad
yeah, let's
website
talk about crap.
because,
Yeah.
like given my history in web design, I'm very critical, and not just with web design, really anything design. I have a lot of friends that will send me maybe a graphic design project they've done, and my first thing out of my mouth is like, well, that's trash. But no, one of my least favorite websites, and Gabe, I think I had made this joke in the past, but this is one of those websites where if I had billions to spend on something, I would buy this website just to shut it down. And if this angers half the podcast listeners, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Let's talk. But eBay, I cannot stand that website. I think it is just a total mess. But I think there is one good thing about this website is I think it's a very good example of what not to do on a website. I have a lot of people doing website redesign projects that I talk to, and there's a lot of questions on what should I do, what should I avoid, what's the best practice in
Mm-hmm.
this, and I think eBay is a prime example of what not to do. One thing I just looked up, an iPad for example on eBay, and the product page is an absolute mess. There's multiple call to actions, which I think is a huge mistake. I can buy now, I can place a bid, I can add to a wait list, and all of these buttons are stacked on top of each other. And the thing that like drives me, just absolutely crazy is below those buttons, just right next to them is the sell yourself, like if I'm looking at an iPad, like why am I putting the sell button right next to the buy buttons? And I get that that's eBay's, model is people selling stuff, but I think from a user experience perspective, having those call to actions just stacked on top of each other, it's just terrible.
Yeah, it's really hard when there's multiple calls to action on a single page. And as you said, I honestly hadn't been out to eBay in a long time. I have not bought anything. I don't know that I've ever sold anything on eBay, but I definitely haven't bought anything on eBay in a
Man,
long
you got to
time.
sell on
But
Facebook
I went
these
and checked
days.
it out. Yeah, exactly. I went and checked it out, and you're right. I mean, it is kind of chaos, and I know we've talked about Amazon kind of being similar in a previous podcast, and there's just so much chaos on Amazon as well. Of just so much information that I think it's really confusing for people. It's tough, man. I mean, I understand that there are multiple ways that they want people to buy and things like that, but they're just. I'm with you. There does definitely seem to be a way that can be simplified, and I think as you said, as we're talking to people who are looking at doing, web redesigns and things like that, simplicity and being very transparent about what it is that you want your prospect or customer to do goes a long way. Because if you're asking them to do three things, they're probably going to do zero. They're likely not going to search out the one thing that you want them to do.
And to the transparency comment too, we talk a lot about the FAQs, the community around selling a product.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I buy this product from you? What do other people say? And that's one thing that I think eBay also makes a huge mistake on, because if you can look at reviews, I couldn't find them. I could find like the seller reviews, but I feel like that's just junk to begin with as well. That's a topic for another podcast. But being able to come on and like, we talked about Amazon a little bit, but like if you go to an Amazon product page, you've got the comparison tables that we love. They've got the product images from customers. They've got the reviews. Everything is, lack of better term, neatly laid out. It's laid out on Amazon at least, whereas eBay, the fact that I couldn't find it, and given I spent maybe 2 minutes on the website, but that's more than enough time. It should have been present in terrible experience, as I said. I don't want to go too deep, because I feel like I could talk about eBay just being a terrible website, but to eBay's point, I feel like a lot of people too, the big thing is selling stuff on Facebook now, and Facebook's totally different in my opinion, because you're uploading photos. I feel like every time I've sold something on Facebook, I physically met the person. So I feel like there's a different aspect of, I'm not selling an iPad and receiving a brick in the mail.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's so different. Yeah, the eBay piece of that is so different for sure. I wanted to this is a little bit of a circle back to a comment you made earlier about the graphic design thing. I almost took a picture of this book that I was reading to my kids the other day, because I wanted to send it to you, because I knew it was going to make you really, really mad. And
oh
I
no!
To just mess with you. It was this book, and it was the way that it was laid out. The words in these little circles like ran out of the circle, and so the letters were running out of the circle that the letter was supposed to be in. And I was just like, oh my goodness, if I send this to Zach, he's going to completely lose his mind. And I still will find it and take a picture of it and send it to you, just because I know it's going to infuriate you so much.
Please do. And it reminds me of one of my favorite websites, and the website's kind of a joke, kind of a game, and I cannot think of the name. I always forget the name. I'll send a link to you, Gabe, and I'll post a link in the podcast description when I do find it. But it's basically all about bad UI, bad mistakes you can make on your website. So like the call to action buttons, like it'll say like, click this button, and like the button's already clicked, the text runs out of the button, or like put your password in, and like you have to delete the actual password letters that are in the box, to type. It's a total mess, but there's so many different websites and places you can go for inspiration on how to make a good website. So there's so many different components that go into it, and we'll talk about a few of those today. But one thing I like to point out is, if you are doing a website redesign project, if you're not looking at what your competition is doing, that's mistake number one.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of inspiration you can get of maybe things you like and things you don't like as well, and at least an opportunity to potentially set yourself apart from the competition, but if there are things that you feel like they're doing well, okay, maybe you need to replicate a little bit of that, at least maybe from a simplicity of the page, things like that. Obviously probably don't want to be stealing copy and all those good things.
Don't copy and paste.
But, yeah, don't copy paste. Want to be able to set yourself apart. But, certainly doing that research and getting a better understanding, from a competitive perspective, how your competitors are framing up the services that they're selling, so that you can, think about the value that your customer is going to be getting out of that same or similar solution. That's huge for sure. I'm with you. You certainly want to do that research beforehand.
And this is going to be something we talk about a little bit later too, but I think one of the places you can do research is with the people actually using your website. We have so many tools you can use, Gabe. I know you're kind of the expert on the Microsoft tools. Clarity, Hotjar is one that I've used in the past. Even simple things like Zoom, you can kind of see where people are looking at their pages. So with Hotjar, for example, this is one I've used, so I'll speak on this one a little bit. But you put this code on your website, and as people visit your website, it generates a heat map of where they're looking, where's their mouse clicking, and what's happening on this website. So one of the examples I like to use is, one of the website redesigns I did was for a bank, and I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head. It was above 70%. I'm confident, but everyone was clicking, that online banking login. They came to the website, they wanted to log in and check their balances and all that kind of fun stuff. Why they didn't use the mobile app is beyond me at the time, but focusing on the website, everyone just wanted to log in. So knowing that everyone was logging in, 70+%, it kind of changes how that website, redesign takes place, because at this point, I know that almost everyone is coming to log in. So they're not going to scroll on the website. They're not going to click through these tabs. How do I capture their attention? And the way I did that, and this is something, if you want to take a note of, write it down. If you're doing a website redesign project, absolutely steal this idea from me. But we put, you click on that login box, it kind of pops up on top of the page, and you've got your login box. And then right next to that, we had basically an ad space where it's not a traditional ad where we were selling, ads for Google or Facebook, but this was actually just an ad for the bank, maybe a banking product, a banking service we wanted people to use. For a while, we really wanted people to use the mobile app. So we were promoting the mobile app right on that login page because we already know that 70% of our audience is clicking that online banking login button. So once they click on that, they're brought to this page. We've got the ad, we've got the action they want to do anyway. So they see it. It's not bothering them. They don't have to go hunting for it, but it just ties in that whole experience.
I love that idea. You showed me that example previously, and I thought it was so brilliant because, as you said, you're using the data to drive that conversation. So if you know that a huge portion of the people are coming to that page and clicking on that login screen, which then pops up that splash screen to log in, why not put an ad there? And I've had customers tell me that, in broadband service providers specifically, tell me that there's a lot of people that still come to their website to log in and check their email, which frankly surprises me because I don't think I've ever gone to the email address that Comcast has provided to me. But hey,
I didn't know they gave you one. So
yeah, they just give you one.
I'm a little jealous.
So and it's not that exciting. But yeah, if you see that people, if you're using a Microsoft Clarity or you're using Hotjar, I think both of those are really good solutions for this specifically. And we can talk just a little bit more about what those solutions are specifically here in just a moment. But if you have that data that tells you, hey, a lot of people are going here and they're clicking on this button and that splash screen's coming up, I think it's a brilliant idea. Just include an ad there, even if it's not trying to sell something specifically. In your guys' case, you were trying to get people to download the app. Hey, great opportunity to push that, or maybe even talk about a new service, whatever it may be. But it's a great opportunity to have that conversation with your customer for sure.
Absolutely. And I think the main point of this is, whether or not you're doing a website redesign project or not, understanding how people interact with your website is huge. Gabe, to your point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, to your point, Gabe, is if you don't know this, it's easy to find out. We've got a few tools we want to walk you through today. But Gabe, I saw you made a note of this, and this is something I didn't actually think of. But you mentioned using Zoom to have someone navigate your website. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just kind of thought of this idea randomly as I was doing some preparation for the podcast. But my thought was, when was the last time you had somebody who was not familiar with your product, your service, whatever, go to your website and actually try and purchase something from you? And what are the things that they do that are different than what you would expect based on what you kind of think their buying journey would be? Can they actually find the services that you want them to purchase? If you're trying to sell them broadband service, can they find the broadband services that you're selling? Can they accurately choose which solution they think would be better for them? And my idea behind this with using Zoom or any screen recording tool specifically is, if you ask somebody to do this, maybe you ask a friend or a neighbor or a family member or somebody who's just not familiar with your website, have them go through and do this and record it in Zoom, record it in some sort of screen recording tool. And that way you have that piece of, you have that video that you can then take back to other people in your organization, so that it's not just I watched this person, I gave this to my cousin and I watched him or her do it, and, they weren't able to find the thing. It's very anecdotal at that point. But if you can actually show them the recording to say, hey, look, this is where this person clicked, this is where they got lost, these are the issues that they ran into, you have that, that artifact, right, to take back to others in your organization and actually show them where things maybe fell down.
Absolutely. And Gabe, I'm like flashing back to this website project I did. But one of the things I did was very similar to that. Is I said, hey, who's the most you lack a better term, who's the most experienced employee we have? Who's been here the longest? Who's maybe the more older employees we have. But I sent them this website template, and I said, here you go. You're like, I didn't give them any context. It was, here you go. Like, tell me what you think. Like, do what you need to do, and let me know. And then I took that feedback, because the people using your website, it's going to be a different idea than me, the one developing the website, or you, the one, maybe promoting the website. Everyone's going to have different ideas. So you really need to understand the differences on how people use your website, because not everyone's going to use and interact with your website the same way. And one thing I see often with that too is another mistake you can make is, I'm going to call this hiding information. So I see this a lot in broadband, and then I also see this a lot in banking. The banking example I want to get is, you see a lot of rate shopping. Maybe the broadband equivalent is going to be speed shopping. People shopping based on speeds and bank rates, whatever that is. The bank rate, if you don't have your rates on your website, it's going to, like, if someone's coming to look to say, oh, who's got the best rates? They're going to see what it is and say, okay, well, nothing's here, on to the next bank. And that's something I've done as a consumer as well. There's a lot of, digital banks, online banks out there, and they all have their rates promoted, savings accounts with 0.7% high interest, whatever that may be. You see that, you think, okay, that's cool. But then I go to another website and it says nothing about rates. That one's kind of out of my mind then. With broadband providers, I see a lot of, enter your address or make an account, or extra steps that's kind of hiding that information. And the thing that really makes me mad about those is, if you have fiber in the ground, if you've got these multi-gig services, you've got a lot to brag about as is. There's nothing to hide. So I think one thing you want to avoid when doing these website projects is to make sure you're not hiding or concealing information that consumers may be looking for.
Yeah, and one to just on that broadband example specifically, I'm so with you. It drives me crazy when I have to enter an address to see pricing. And I understand that there are concerns of, well, I don't know if my customer that's living in this particular area can get fiber, so maybe I need them to give me my address so I understand what services I can offer to them. I still think it's totally reasonable to at least just make it visible, put a disclaimer, and then when people go through the actual buying process, then they can give you the information about where they actually live. And I realize that means that you may frustrate some people, but to me, the benefits of being transparent about your pricing way outweigh the, negatives of having to, of those situations where you may be offering a service to somebody that they can't get. And then again, once they go through the buying process, then they can enter their address. I mean, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but would you, there's no other like e-commerce website where, if you went to Amazon, you don't really enter your address and then they show you the products that you can buy, right? Like that just seems weird to me. And I feel like anytime I'm being asked for that additional information, I'm much less likely to provide it. And I'm probably just going to go search for another service provider that doesn't ask me that information. And I can see what their pricing is, and they're more transparent about it.
And one thing,
am I like way off base there?
No, I think you're totally on. And one thing I want to add to that though is you might see the competition of like, oh, I don't want my competition to see my prices and my plans. But if you just put it an address in, your competition's already able to, pull an address and plug it into your website. So you're not really, hiding much if you're trying to go that route.
Correct.
Either. But I think being transparent, we've talked a lot about transparency, having that information out there. I'm not going to go out and buy a car without, knowing the price. Why would I buy anything without knowing the price? But I think being upfront, and again, if you've got fiber in the ground, you've got something to brag about already. So don't shy away from having that on your public facing website.
Yeah, I very much agree with you on that one. That one drives me nuts. So I wanted to circle back to Hotjar and Clarity. As you mentioned Hotjar, I know you want to talk about that one. I want to talk about Microsoft Clarity a little bit. So both of these tools they're very simple snippets of code that you can take and copy and paste into the header of your website. And what they'll do is they will then track how people are actually interacting with your website and give you very simple dashboards to get insight on what are people clicking on? How far are they scrolling down the page? Are they clicking on portions of my website that they think are hyperlinks, but actually aren't? Those would be called like dead clicks. And in the case of Clarity, and I don't know if, I think Hotjar has this too. You let me, correct me if I'm wrong, but they also even show screen recordings of how people navigate around the page and where they're clicking as they're going through the page. In the case of Microsoft Clarity, that's the one I've used the most and I'm kind of most comfortable with, but it's a completely free tool. So that's number one reason why I like it is it's free. So the price is right. The second thing is it's GDPR and CCPA compliant. So it's already set up in case, in case you are going to be, in case these data privacy rules become more prevalent in your industry specifically in the future, the Clarity tool specifically is already set up for that. So you don't have to worry about any of that. And I just love the insight that it provides. How does that compare to Hotjar, Zach? I know you've used that one in the past.
To be honest with you, Gabe,
functionality?
The functionality is almost identical. You can do the heat maps. You can see how people interact with your websites. The big call between the two is I think Hotjar has like a free trial, or if not like a free tier with like very limited features. But as you mentioned, Microsoft Clarity is totally free. So the point being is you have no reason not to use either one of these. If you can't pay for it, Microsoft Clarity might be your route to go. If Hotjar has an additional feature that you're looking for, you might have to pay for it. But I see absolutely no reason, given everything we've talked about, the compliance, the pricing and everything, that you wouldn't want to use one of these tools. Understand how people are interacting with your websites. We've said that so many times today, and these tools do exactly that.
Yeah, they're really powerful. And I've set up one. I'm a partner in a small business here in the area that I live. And we were looking at we set up Microsoft Clarity on the website, and we looked at the data to see how far people were scrolling down the page, because the business is a co-working business and we want to drive people into memberships. And when we looked at it, the membership section on the page, only like 25 or 30% of people were scrolling down to that portion of the page. And we quickly realized, oh my goodness, if only 25 or 30% of people that are going to this page, how can we get this higher up on the physical page so that more people are going to actually scroll down and see it? Because it's insane when you look at the scroll heat map, how quickly people fall off once they get below the fold. I would guess that probably 50 to 60% of people, are falling off once they get below the fold. And then once you start to go further down the page, you're getting maybe 10, 25, percent of people that are actually going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of your page. So if your content isn't front and center and way high up on your page, if those call to actions are not there, you're probably not going to get people to engage with it. But look at the data, set up Clarity, set up Hotjar, whatever it may be, to get a better understanding. And then what we did was we just physically moved that membership portion much higher up on the page. And all of a sudden we started getting a lot more clicks through to the membership page. It was like I looked at the numbers. I think it was like a 30% increase in the clicks to the membership page. And we didn't change anything besides just literally moving the physical location of where that membership section was and just moved it much higher on the page.
Absolutely. Don't hide content, know what people are doing on your website. We've talked about a couple tools, Zoom, if you want to do that, see how people use your website. But I think there's so many, different topics around, what makes a good website. We might have to keep this series going, talk in a few episodes about some additional things you can do on your website to really make you stand out from your competition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think simplicity is a huge one, right? Making sure that it's easy for people, unlike the eBay example we were talking about, where there's multiple calls to action. Make sure that call to action is really clear. Make sure it's up front and center for the people. We've talked about this in the past too, but also tying the call to action buttons back to the benefit that your customers are going to receive, and also maybe even putting some time bound around it. So, using an example of like network security, if you're trying to sell a network security solution, protect your network today, right? By putting a time bound piece around that, as well as a really strong call to action, you're going to drive a lot more clicks than learn more or buy now. There's just ways that you can adjust those calls to action to be much more specific. So that's a huge one. And I mentioned the clicks there, this idea of dead clicks as well. That was a huge eye opener for me too. When we started looking at the data was, again, you don't really know how people are going to navigate around your website until you actually watch them do it. And people will think that a particular section is hyperlinked and they'll click on it and nothing will happen. Well, if enough people are doing that, why don't you make it hyperlinked back to the thing that you want them to do? So adding areas of your website that are going to drive people back to be able to take a specific action, especially if they're clicking on it already. And you can see that with, as an example, the Microsoft Clarity data.
Gabe, that's some fantastic insight. And I really think we might have to revisit these website topics in the future as well. I think there's so much to talk about there. But I really hope everyone enjoyed this discussion we had today, talking about our favorite websites, Zillow, our least favorite websites, eBay. Feel free to message both Gabe and myself. Connect with us on LinkedIn. If you're doing a website redesign project, maybe you've got a website you want me to critique, definitely send that to me. I'll be somewhat nice with that. But don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. And if you'd like, check us out on YouTube. You can subscribe to us and watch those videos now as well. But again, feel free to connect with both Gabe and myself on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, you can either send us a message there or visit our website. That's all for this week, and we'll talk soon.